The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was a cathedral of power, looming obsidian pillars, glowing banners of 1,000 civilizations, and at its center, a circular platform where the accused stood before their judges. Today, that platform held General Adrian Voss, humanity's greatest warrior, Earth's champion, and the man who had led the coalition to victory against the Sci-Fi Dominion. He should have been hailed as a hero. Instead, he was on trial for war crimes he never committed. Voss stood with his back straight, hands bound by plasma restraints, his war-scarred face unreadable as the council's judges recited his supposed atrocities. The voices of alien diplomats droned in different languages, but the accusations were the same. Excessive force, unlawful warfare, genocide of the Sci-Fi homeworld. Lies, all of it. The Sci-Fi had been a race of slavers, conquerors who had burned human colonies to ash, taken prisoners to fuel their war machine. Voss had ended them. But he hadn't committed genocide. The council itself had authorized the final assault. Now, they wanted a scapegoat. A cold, familiar voice echoed through the chamber. High Chancellor Irvin, a reptilian Drexian with golden eyes that never blinked, leaned forward from his throne. General Voss, do you deny these charges? Voss lifted his head, scanning the sea of alien faces, some gloating, some indifferent, but not a single human representative left to defend him. Earth's seat on the council sat empty. Betrayed. Abandoned. Voss's jaw tightened. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but edged with steel. You already made your decision before this trial began. Whispers rippled through the chamber. Chancellor Irvin's thin lips curled into something resembling amusement. That is not a denial. Voss's gaze hardened. No fear, no begging, just the cold understanding that he had trusted the wrong people. I don't deny anything, Chancellor. I did what had to be done. And if I had to do it again. He leaned forward slightly, letting his voice cut through the silence. I wouldn't change a damn thing. The chamber erupted into a mix of shouts and gasps. The High Chancellor's smirk vanished. Then the council has spoken. The verdict was a formality. Exile. They wouldn't dare execute him. He was too well known, too much of a symbol. But they could erase him, make the galaxy forget. Guards seized him. As they dragged him away, Voss caught the eye of Admiral Hadrian Locke, his former second-in-command, now sitting among the council's allies. A traitor. Locke didn't flinch. He simply watched as his former general was led away toward a fate worse than death. And Adrian Voss, he didn't look back. Because if they thought they had broken him, they had no idea what was coming next. The sky was black with storms, lit only by jagged streaks of green lightning. A howling wind ripped across the jagged cliffs, kicking up razor-sharp sand that scored everything it touched. The planet was a graveyard, a dumping ground for the unwanted. This was Erebus 9, a barren, lawless world where the Galactic Council sent prisoners to be forgotten. No patrols, no guards, no infrastructure, just exiles fighting over scraps, waiting to die. And now, Adrian Voss was one of them. The shuttle that had dumped him here was already a speck in the storm-choked sky, its engines flaring as it vanished into the void. He didn't watch it leave. Instead, he took in his surroundings. A ruined city loomed in the distance, its skeletal towers reaching toward the sky like broken fingers. Smoke curled from bonfires below. Proof of life. Not friendly life. The first attack came fast. A blur of movement in the sand. A clawed alien, skin like burnt leather, a rusted blade aimed for his throat. Voss sidestepped, caught the attacker's wrist, and twisted. A sickening snap, a scream, and the alien collapsed into the dirt. Two more emerged from the dunes, scavengers with hungry eyes and blood-stained weapons. Voss didn't hesitate. The first one lunged. He caught its arm, drove an elbow into its throat, and ripped the blade from its hands. Before the second attacker could react, Voss threw the knife, burying it in the creature's skull. Silence. The wind howled, but nothing else moved. He exhaled. His instincts were still sharp, his body still strong. But he was alone, unarmed, and the real threats hadn't shown themselves yet. He stripped the bodies for supplies: a crude knife, a water flask, a torn cloak to shield himself from the sandstorm. Survival 101. Then he started walking toward the ruined city. ###, the kingdom of the lost. Night fell, and the fires in the ruined city grew brighter. From the cliffs above, Voss watched as war bands patrolled the streets, ragtag warriors from 100 species. Some bore old military insignias, remnants of armies that had abandoned them. Others were mercenaries turned warlords, ruling over the weak and the desperate. Voss could already see the cracks. No unity, no discipline, just scattered gangs fighting over territory. They had weapons but no strategy. Soldiers, but no leader. They had survived on this hellhole. But survival was not enough. Voss would show them how to thrive. His mind sharpened. This wasn't just exile. This was an opportunity. He had been forsaken. Now, he would build something greater. And when he returned to the stars, it would not be as a man seeking revenge. It would be as a king. Adrian Voss did not waste time. He spent his first days watching, learning, waiting. Erebus 9 was a powder keg. Hundreds of factions, but no order. The strong ruled, the weak served, and every day was a fight for survival. It was a world begging to be conquered, and Voss had spent his life conquering. The first warband. His first real test came when a patrol from the Bloodfangs, one of the larger warbands, spotted him outside the ruins. 6 heavily armed warriors, 2 reptilian Orcs, a cybernetically enhanced Farkari, and 3 battle-scarred humans. They surrounded him, blades and blasters drawn. Their leader, a scared brute named Karvuk, grinned. "New blood. Bad luck, human. You belong to us now." Voss didn't answer. He moved. In one fluid motion, he snapped Karvuk's wrist, tore the blaster from his hands, and fired point-blank into the nearest Korik's skull. The others hesitated, just long enough for Voss to crush another's throat with a brutal elbow strike. The remaining 4 tried to dogpile him, but Voss fought like a force of nature. A broken blade turned into a makeshift dagger. A stolen pistol became an executioner's tool. 30 seconds later, 5 were dead. Karvuk lay bleeding in the dirt, gasping. Voss loomed over him. "Tell me where your warband is." His voice was calm, cold, absolute. Karvuk spat blood. "They'll hunt you down and—" Voss put a boot on his chest and pressed down, hard. "Tell me, or I'll kill every last one of them anyway." Fear flickered in Karvuk's eyes. He talked. The fall of the Bloodfangs. That night, Voss walked into the Bloodfang stronghold alone. A crumbling factory-turned-fortress. Dozens of warriors, all veterans of 100 battles, sat around burning barrels, feasting, drinking, not expecting death to come through their gates. Voss let them see him. Let them laugh, mock, underestimating him like everyone else had. Then he threw Karvuk's severed head into the fire. Silence. "Your leader is dead," Voss said. "You have 2 choices. Kneel or join him." A few charged. Voss cut them down in seconds. The others hesitated. Then, one by one, they dropped their weapons and knelt. A king rises. By morning, the Bloodfangs were no more. They were now Voss's first army. He enforced discipline. No more mindless raiding, only strategic war. He trained them in human tactics, small unit coordination, shock warfare, psychological dominance. He united other factions, absorbing them through conquest, intimidation, and sheer tactical brilliance. Within a month, he ruled half the ruined city. Within 6 months, he controlled all of Erebus 9. And then, with an army at his back, Voss set his sights on the stars. The galaxy had cast him aside. Now he would return to claim it. Erebus 9 had once been a world of the discarded. Now it was a fortress. Under Voss's rule, the planet had transformed. The warbands that once fought over scraps were now a cohesive military force. The scavenged ruins had become barracks, weapons foundries, and training camps. Battle-hardened exiles had become soldiers, fanatics, believers. But they had no way off-world. Not yet. Voss needed a shipyard, a fleet, and a way to strike first, and he knew exactly where to get them. The first target, Outposts Zeta 9. Zeta 9 was a mid-tier council outpost, orbiting the gas giant Draco's IV. It was a refueling station, a waypoint for merchant convoys, and low-priority patrol ships. Lightly defended, not important enough to be reinforced, but valuable enough to be noticed if it fell. It was perfect. The Forsaken had one stolen ship, a patched-together battlecruiser, rebuilt from wreckage found on Erebus 9. They named it Iron Requiem, a grim reminder of what they had suffered. It would be the first weapon of their new war. Voss's plan was simple: strike fast, hit hard, and leave nothing but terror in their wake. The assault begins. The attack came in the dead of night cycle. Iron Requiem dropped out of warp, its weapons already hot. Before the station's defenses could even power up, 3 torpedoes ripped through its shield generators. Alarms blared. Security teams scrambled. Too late. Voss and his shock troops launched from the cruiser, boarding shuttles slamming into the docking bays. The first wave of Forsaken poured into the corridors like a flood of death. Brutal, disciplined, unstoppable. Voss led from the front. He moved like a predator through the chaos, a stolen pulse rifle in one hand, a blade in the other. A squad of council guards rounded a corner. 3 headshots, 2 knife kills. A Drexian officer tried to flee. Voss crushed his skull against a bulkhead. A security turret locked onto him. He yanked a fallen soldier in front of him, let the body take the shots, then threw a grenade to silence it. Every corridor became a graveyard. Terror as a weapon. Within an hour, the station was theirs. Survivors, council officers, merchant crews, terrified civilians, Weir rounded up and forced to their knees in the main hangar bay. Voss walked among them, his cold gaze scanning their faces. "You all thought we were dead." His voice was calm, measured, absolute. "You thought the Forsaken were gone, that we would rot in exile while you sat safe in your towers." He stepped forward, pressing a boot against a trembling officer's chest. "You were wrong." Then, in full view of every prisoner, he executed the man with a single shot. The message was clear. The Forsaken had returned, and the war had only just begun. News of Outpost Zeta 9's destruction spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council tried to bury it at first. A pirate raid, a malfunctioning defense system. But whispers told a different story. An exiled human general had returned, leading an army of the damned. The Forsaken weren't just surviving. They were conquering. And back on Earth, the people listened. The seeds of rebellion. Earth had never forgotten Adrian Voss. They had watched the trial, the betrayal, the humiliation of their greatest hero. And when the Council abandoned him, Earth's leadership had bowed their heads like obedient dogs, unwilling to defy their alien overlords. But the people had seethed. Now, as Voss's name spread across the underworld, as the image of his cold execution at Zeta 9 played on smuggled broadcasts, something changed. Military defectors vanished from their posts. Weapons depots were raided. Old resistance cells reawakened. The Council had tried to break humanity's spirit when they exiled Voss. Instead, they had given it something to believe in. Council crisis, the fear of humanity. "We should have executed him." The words came from Admiral Hadrian Locke, Voss's former second-in-command, now sitting in the Galactic Council's war chamber. He was no longer just a soldier. He had power now, an enforcer of the Council's will. Chancellor Irvin's reptilian eyes narrowed. You assured us he would die on Erebus 9, Admiral. He did not. Locke clenched his fists under the table. Because we underestimated him. We always did. A hologram flickered to life. A map of Zeta 9. Its defenses shattered. Its fleet missing or destroyed. Locke exhaled sharply. Voss was not just taking revenge. He was building something. We cannot allow him to gain momentum, Irvin hissed. We must crush him now, before the fire spreads. And how do you propose we do that? Another counselor scoffed. Send a fleet. Bomb Erebus 9 into dust. Locke frowned. That wouldn't work. Not against Voss. This wasn't just a rogue warband anymore. This was an uprising. If we strike too hard, we turn him into a martyr. Locke's voice was measured, but cold. We need something more personal. Irvin's eyes gleamed. You knew him best, Admiral. What would break him? Locke's response was immediate. Earth. The coming storm. Back on Erebus 9, Voss stood on the bridge of Iron Requiem, staring at the holomap of the galaxy. Zeta 9 had been the first step. Now his fleet was growing. Refitted ships from the Council's scrapyards, armed with weapons stolen from their own arsenals. The next move. Something bigger, something that would shake the galaxy to its core. But then, a transmission came through. An encrypted signal. From Earth. Voss's expression didn't change, but deep in his chest, a familiar fire ignited once more. It was time to go home. The encrypted message flickered to life in Voss's war room. A grainy holo image appeared, an old face, hardened by years of quiet resistance. General Elias Marquez, former commander of Earth's defense forces, one of the few who had opposed Voss's exile. If you're hearing this, Adrian, then you already know what's coming. Marquez's voice was low, strained, but resolute. The Council knows Earth is turning. They won't allow it. They're sending a fleet. Massive, overwhelming. They're not coming to fight. They're coming to make an example out of us. The message cut for a moment. Static, interference, maybe battle damage. Then it resumed. If you still believe in Earth, if you still believe in us, then come home. We don't have much time. The feed went dark. Silence filled the war room. Voss exhaled slowly. Earth was calling him back. Not for revenge. Not for conquest. For salvation. He turned to his commanders, his warlords, his Forsaken army. Prepare the fleet. His voice was steel. We're taking Earth back. Earth's last stand. The Council's fleet arrived first. 15 warships, bristling with weapons, designed to crush planetary resistance before it could spread. They didn't issue warnings. They didn't demand surrender. They opened fire. Orbital strikes tore through military installations. Council shock troops landed in the streets of Earth's capital, storming through the city like conquerors. Any sign of resistance was met with annihilation. Locke stood aboard the flagship of the Council fleet, watching the chaos unfold on the surface. Let them struggle, he murmured. Let them remember what defying the Council costs. But then, alarms blared. A new fleet was dropping out of warp. Hundreds of ships, some sleek and deadly, others cobbled together from salvaged wreckage. But all of them bore the same sigil, the mark of the Forsaken. Voss had arrived. The Lion returns. The battle for Earth erupted in an instant. Iron Requiem led the charge, unleashing a storm of kinetic rounds and plasma torpedoes. Council warships reeled as Forsaken boarding pods slammed into their hulls, unleashing warriors who fought like demons. On the ground, hidden human resistance fighters rose up, striking at the Council troops from behind as drop pods rained from the sky, unleashing Voss's shock troops into the chaos. And at the heart of it all, Voss himself landed in the ruins of the capital. The streets were on fire, bodies littering the ground, smoke rising from the shattered remains of Earth's defenses. A Council Walker mech loomed in the distance, its cannons aimed toward the human stronghold. Voss charged. A rocket launcher ripped from a fallen soldier. A perfect shot to the knee joint. The machine collapsed. He climbed its frame, leaped onto the cockpit, and plunged his blade through the pilot's skull. The mech fell, exploding in a rain of fire and metal. A stunned silence. Then, the humans roared. Their general had returned. Their king had come home. And Earth would never kneel again. The Council fleet was broken. Wreckage of their once mighty warships drifted across Earth's orbit, burning like dying embers in the void. The few surviving vessels fled, their commanders realizing, too late, that they had underestimated the one enemy they feared most. Humanity was no longer their subject. It was their reckoning. On the surface, the final Council troops fell back, fighting a losing battle. Voss stood amidst the rubble of Earth's capital, his soldiers securing the city, his people reclaiming their home. The Council banners were torn down, replaced with the sigil of the Forsaken, a blackened wolf's head, the mark of those abandoned but never defeated. But the war was far from over. The Council's response. In the Council's grand war chamber, fear spread like wildfire. Chancellor Irvin's reptilian claws dug into the armrest of his throne. "We should have destroyed them centuries ago," he snarled. "We should have crushed their world to dust." Admiral Locke stood silent, staring at the battle reports. Humanity's resurgence wasn't just a rebellion. It was an empire being forged in blood. Erebus 9 had become a military stronghold. Zeta 9 had become a weapons foundry. Now Earth had risen in defiance. And soon, the entire Council space would burn. "We have one option left," Locke said at last. "The Purge Fleet." A hushed silence fell over the Council. Even Irvin hesitated. The Purge Fleet, an armada built for one purpose only, planetary annihilation. The last time it had been deployed, an entire civilization was erased from history. Deploy it. Irvin hissed. Burn their world. Burn them all. Locke gave no argument, because deep down, he knew this was the only way to stop Voss. The Forsaken prepare. On Earth, Voss stood before a massive holomap of the galaxy. His commanders gathered around, warriors who had once been outcasts, criminals, or broken soldiers, now leaders of a revolution. "The Council will not let this stand," Voss said, his voice calm but absolute. "They will come with everything they have. They will not negotiate. They will not hesitate." A scared Drexian warlord, one of the first non-humans to join Voss's cause, growled. "Then we meet them in the void. We strike first." Voss shook his head. "No, this war isn't about a single battle anymore. It's about ending their rule. Not just for us, but for every species they've oppressed." He turned, his eyes burning with purpose. "We don't just defend Earth. We take the fight to them. We march on the Council's homeworld." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, his commanders nodded. The final war had begun. The Forsaken Armada tore through hyperspace like a storm of vengeance. At its head, aboard the Iron Requiem, Adrian Voss stood on the command deck, his gaze fixed on the Council's homeworld. Primaris Vex, a planet of opulence, the beating heart of a corrupt empire. It would burn before the day was done. Behind him, his warlords waited, tense but eager. They had fought for years, clawing their way from exile and ruin to this final moment. "This is where we end it," Voss said, his voice a quiet storm. "No more running. No more hiding. We break them here, so no one else suffers under their rule again." The fleet emerged from warp, and the final battle began. The Purge Fleet awakens. The Council had prepared. From the shadows of Primaris Vex, the Purge Fleet revealed itself, colossal dreadnoughts, each capable of glassifying entire planets. Their weapons charged, aimed at the Forsaken forces. Locke stood aboard the Council flagship, staring at the man he once called his brother. "Voss," he murmured, "I wish you'd stayed dead." With a single order, the Purge Fleet fired. Hellfire in the void. The first Forsaken ships vanished in eruptions of flame. Voss's fleet weaved and struck back, swarming like a pack of starving wolves. Boarding pods smashed into Council cruisers, unleashing warriors who fought like demons. On the ground, drop pods rained like falling stars, Forsaken troops storming the gilded streets of Primaris Vex. The Council's ruling elite fled their palaces, scrambling for escape ships. But there was nowhere left to run. The final duel, Voss versus Locke. At the height of the battle, Voss led his strike team straight into the Council flagship. They cut through guards, through corridors slick with blood, until finally he reached the command bridge. And there stood Locke, the man who had once fought beside him, the man who had betrayed him. "You should have died on Erebus 9, Locke growled, igniting his plasma blade. Voss drew his own sword, its edge burning white-hot. "You should have fought beside me," he answered. Then they clashed. Blow after blow, two warriors, two legends, fighting atop the burning ruin of an empire. In the end, Voss was faster. A final, brutal strike. Locke staggered, blade slipping from his grasp. As he fell to his knees, blood spilling from his chest, he laughed bitterly. "You think this changes anything?" Locke rasped. "You think the galaxy will ever accept a king forged in blood?" Voss stared down at him. "They don't need a king." And with that, he drove his blade through Locke's heart. The end of an era. With Locke dead and the Council's forces shattered, Primaris Vex fell. The Council chambers were stormed. Their leaders were dragged into the streets, screaming as the people they had once ruled turned on them. And Adrian Voss, the Forsaken King, stood at the heart of it all. A man once betrayed. Now, the ruler of a new order. But as he looked upon the burning capital, he knew his war was not over. The galaxy was vast, and his rule had only just begun.